For more on Dorsey's departure from Twitter and what it could mean for his other company, Square, let's bring in Packy McCormick of Not Boring Capital. Packy, were you surprised today by the news? And are you surprised, I can understand the decline in Twitter shares, but Square didn't get a pop either, even though now it's going to get a full-time CEO.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, Jack was sending the signs last night. He sent a very melancholy "I love Twitter" tweet. We should have seen it. Obviously, the market got excited early on about Jack stepping down, and then as the new CEO was announced, it faded. And we can talk about that decision. I actually like it a lot more than Dan does. But I think the Square kind of shrug is an acknowledgement of the fact that Jack has mostly been focused on, Square and then his other love, Bitcoin, for most of the past at least a year, maybe a little bit more. And so, if he's spending a little bit more time at Square, that's maybe a slight positive, and maybe the stock's up a little bit. But I think he's really been focused mostly on Square a lot of this time.
So why is a decade veteran, the CTO, with the right choice to bring Twitter out of its innovation funk into the new age of monetization and social commerce? I mean, what's the argument there?
I think the argument is, Jack in his letter wrote about the fact that, the company needs to move beyond having a founder. I think there's still something about the idea of having the stability of somebody inside the company who is well respected and trusted, and who's actually, over the past couple of years, one of the most impressive things that Twitter has done is kind of rebuilding its entire tech stack to be able to innovate on top of. They had a ton of technical debt built up, and under Agarwal, they've kind of paid down some of that tech debt and made it easier to innovate. So while the particular experiments have not worked out to the full extent that I would have hoped that they would so far, the fact that he built a platform where those experiments can happen a lot more quickly, I think is a really good sign. It's still really early in terms of things like Twitter Blue. I paid the $2.99 essentially out of charity. I think there's a lot of users who feel the same way, that Twitter generates a ton of value for a ton of people without being able to capture a lot of that value. Hopefully what's happened at Twitter is that tech refactoring has helped a culture where innovation is now possible, and they'll stumble into the right thing. I think one of the most impressive things about Square, and one of the maybe biggest differences, is that Square's also run a bunch of unsuccessful experiments. They just haven't totally kind of reshifted the company's trajectory like Twitter, where Twitter goes all in on one thing and then all in on the next thing. Hopefully what they've set up at Twitter now is a base for innovation, like Square actually has and has benefited from, so that they finally hit on Cash App, and that was the thing that kind of made them take off.
PMAC, Karen mentioned on our call before the show, Dan just alluded to it, that this announcement might potentially open the door for an acquisition of Twitter by somebody. Do you see it that way?
I have a hard time seeing who in this environment is able to acquire someone like Twitter. I mean, who has the combination of the money and the ability to get a deal through. It seems unlikely. Twitter, for the fact that it's only a $36 billion company, is a hugely, hugely important asset and shaper of the public conversation. So I can't imagine regulators letting that fall into somebody like a Facebook's hand. I don't see it going that way. I mean, I think, I'm a long-suffering Twitter shareholder, and I think probably, we'll probably see another year or two of them trying to figure out kind of what to do with this platform that they built and this really unique asset that they built, and how they can capture value from that going forward.
Packy, great to see you. Thanks.
Great to see you.
Packy McCormick of Not Boring. Karen, what went through your mind, I believe, is also a potential sale, although the stock action, the price action didn't really support that argument.
True, it didn't, right. Otherwise, it would be up. But I think that if you are a company out there and you have had an interest in Twitter, I think the door is open now, right? Instead of doing a whole search and them looking for a CEO from outside of the company, I think they would have had a hard time doing that. Someone might have said, look, I don't know that Twitter will, not get sold in the short term. So do I want to take this job? So instead, they went someone inside. He may be great. I don't know. But clearly there's some issues there that they need to get a handle of. And he hasn't been very, shareholders aren't familiar with him. So it's sort of an interesting choice. Also, we are getting towards proxy season where you have to nominate directors. Not that the vote is, but you have to nominate directors soon. Obviously, we know Elliott has been unhappy with a lot of things there. I don't know if there's more pressure coming. And so Dorsey felt he had to do this. And so just, to me, it all seems they're more vulnerable to a sale now than they have been in a long time.
Has the Twitter picture, in your view, Tim, changed? in the past day?
Well, as a Twitter shareholder, look, this is incredibly frustrating, and there's two things that are frustrating to me. One, I mean, it's extraordinary that Jack Dorsey was able to be CEO, basically married and with two families, and in a world that we live in today, and actually get away with it this long. But that's not my frustration. My frustration is on Investor Day in February. This was a company that said we're going to double revenues from $3.7 billion to $7.5 billion by the end of 2023. We're going to take DAUs up to 315 million. And the stock basically rallied from their deal with Elliott and really some sense that there was already going to be stuff in play, including $2 billion in buybacks, to that Investor Day where they made, think about those proclamations. I mean, they're almost absurd at this point. Stock rallied 80% and is now down 45% off that 52-week high. I mean, I think there's been a lot of a head fake here, and I think the dynamic around an activist investor who's incented to see the stock go higher and make some changes and do some things that are going to move the stock on top of the company going out and making some bold proclamations, to me, is a formula here that I think has left a lot of investors maybe on the wrong side of this.
Sounds like you're ready to throw the towel in.
Well, I just think you have a case where a lot of good news was made almost clear and articulated, and I don't see where that's coming from. And yet, look, I'm happy to see Elliott try to continue to maneuver and push this company to where I think the intrinsic value is. And I think they are incented to see it go higher again. But I think a lot of this has been tied up in the stock price over the last 6 months.